ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me turn the podium over to Professor Elie.
Bonjour.
Good morning. We're going to start talking about Port-au-Prince, and we're going to look at the earthquake, the 2010 earthquake. Even if that doesn't mean that this is what caused all these problems. Huh? So we can see if there is a relation between the people who and these issues who are going to help us understand how big the catastrophe was. You have to remember also that it's a city that was created in 1949. It was not the first city, but because of its position, its central position between the north and the south, very quickly it became a very important city. But 2 years after it was created, it was built in 1751. There was an earthquake that destroyed it completely, and then after, it remained the capital of the colony. And then after that, in 1770, in other words, 19 years later, there was another earthquake that destroyed it, that destroyed Port-au-Prince. But the proposal, in strategic terms, it was in a position as a city to be the capital of the colony. Well, but that makes you understand that there is a way so people could build in Port-au-Prince, so people could, and today, once again, based on the examples we have, the kinds of housings we have, gingerbread housing, we wanted you to understand that these kinds of housing, they were more interesting for a city like Port-au-Prince because of the threat of the earthquake threat. Because these houses are lighter, they give greater security in case of an earthquake. But it took a long time that there was no real earthquake in Haiti. So we apparently forgot the reason why we decided to build houses the way we did them. That were the kinds of housing that we used to build, that was like the gingerbread housing. In any case, during the 19th century, we could say that there was an equilibrium between the cities, among the cities, even though Port-au-Prince was the capital, but in fact, there was 11 cities with ports. We could even add another one, It was not even open, but it is from these ports that all commercial exchange with foreign nations. It's from those ports that exportation occurred. And this is why they say that we had 11 centers back then. But from 1915. Which is what we call the American occupation. There was a change that was going to take place in these relationships, in this equilibrium. We can say that there were some cities that were doing better than Port-au-Prince, for instance. For instance, Jacmel had electricity. For instance, a city like Cape Haitian at some point. It didn't have any need for the city of Port-au-Prince. But starting in 1915, the circumstances are going to change. There's going to be what we call a concentration of the concentrations in the Port-au-Prince. The activities are going to be concentrated because it is as if there was, well, it didn't happen overnight, but it took a while. And eventually, it's only Port-au-Prince became the city where all all exchanges or commerce were made with foreign nations. This is why, since that time, people began to talk about people felt talking about the Republic of Port-au-Prince. In other words, all the activities were considered in Port-au-Prince, in its surroundings, whereas the other places had less importance on the daily. The other cities were losing in importance and value. That caused a situation which became very difficult. They're talking about they were concentrating all the activities, all the power. In other words, the concentration of all services were reinforced. Would merge with the power, the centralized power of Port-au-Prince. Everything is based in Port-au-Prince, to the point where there are a lot of people who joke about it. They say, for instance, everything is Port-au-Prince. They say that you're just come. Everybody wants to say that you're from Port-au-Prince, or if you're from outside Port-au-Prince, you're not as important an individual. So, well, that was going to cause. But when we're going to get to the year, after the year 1950, or in the 1950s, the circumstances are going to worsen. You have to remember, starting in 1961, since there was a problem with coffee, which was the most important product, it was losing its value on the international market, and since the state was making money based on coffee, since it was losing its value on the coffee, the coffee has devalued. The local economy was impoverished, and as things had gotten worse economically, we can say that the rural areas could no longer survive. So they could not take care of their family and their children. So everybody was going to try to move to Port-au-Prince. When you're getting to the year 1957, 1960, what's going to happen is, we're going to say it's not only a centralization. It's not a centralization. Everything is going to be Port-au-Prince, based in Port-au-Prince. It's almost like the cities in the provinces had no value. Everything was done in Port-au-Prince. So now more people were looking for, were trying to come to Port-au-Prince because that is where you could find. That's where they could find a way to live, to survive. Those who are living in rural areas had nothing to live. But in another way, it was something normal, because agriculture, everything, the economy of the country doesn't have to be based only on agriculture. But there is no processing for the products. There is no processing plant for agricultural products. So all those people who are living in Port-au-Prince, they had to find a place to stay, or they had to find housing. So remember that we say there were first the two earthquakes. We noticed that we realized that it was important to have gingerbread houses, but when people are coming, when you have so many people coming to Port-au-Prince, you have to build a lot of houses. The places where the people have to stay. But at the same time, there was also a bad situation. There was a question of deforestation of the country. You no longer had much forest. The housing, people started building in cinder block with cement. But sometime later, you're going to start having people using more and more cement, and they're going to realize that it's better for them to build in concrete, build housing with concrete. As the houses were being built in concrete, for many of them, for many people in the population, a lot of people who live in Port-au-Prince in the area thought it was like a promotion, a social promotion, because they were building with concrete and cement. And that is, if you didn't have a house that was built in concrete cement, you were considered at a lower social level. So the state, the government did not have any much cover control of regulations. Yes, it's true that we may have rules on urban things, but there was no control. People were improvising. People were just building as if they could without any engineering support. Everybody thought that they were able to master the technology of cement, so they were just building and building and having building floors on top of floors on house. And also the price of land was getting more and more expensive. So not only the houses were being built in concrete, but the houses were compact. They were so close to one another. We got to the point where once you have the earthquake, one was going to hit the other, and that's why we're going to have this serious issue. But what we have to remember is that the last big earthquake that we had, the last big earthquake in Haiti happened 240 years ago. So in other words, everybody forgot there was always a threat of earthquake in Haiti. Well, of course, in the year 2005, there were some voices that were saying that you have to be very careful. Some specialists were saying in 2007 there was an earthquake in 2007, and so we should be very careful. But in any case, the government lost control over what was going on. You imagine that you had about 2 million people living in the metropolitan area. Not only for a long time, the government didn't have any control, but it became even more difficult for them. And at that point, the issue that we were having is since it's a city that was built under mountains. In fact, there are laws that says it's an area that is preserved, where we should have forests. But from time to time, you see that people were building in the forested area. People were cutting trees, and even sometimes you could see that there were complicities between those who were monitoring, those who were regulators, and those who were supposed to implement the law and allowing others to build those houses. Even though they were not supposed to, based on the regulations. And those houses, it was very difficult to build them because that person has to go up with the sand to build this house, and that sand they had to bring the sand up to the mountain, and they had to bring everything that they need to build those houses, but they still managed to build those houses on the mountain, on top of those mountains. So when we get to close to the eve of 2010, it was a situation that was already very difficult in the sense that there were more people who were coming to Port-au-Prince, and people were asking for more housing, and the price of housing was getting more expensive, and so housing was become so expensive that people realized that the best thing to do was to build floors on top of floors without any. And then people start building also upon the mountains, and then so they're causing more issues with when it rained, dirty water coming down from the mountain because you're building up in the mountains. Yeah. All the trash that was coming from the mountain also when it rained, and so by the time we got to 2010, the situation was already very difficult. How are we going to resolve all that? There are some neighborhoods where we can say there are so many people in those neighborhoods and the houses are so small that people cannot sleep at the same time. So people sleep by group and by depending on the time. So it's a very difficult situation. So before the earthquake, the situation was really, really bad. So when we had the earthquake, the situation just worsened, and all those things it got even worse. There was a greater tendency to build. To destroy the forest, to cut the trees, so they can build houses where you had a space for forest. It's a situation that was really difficult, we could say. And when I say that, People have to drink water. People need water for potable water in general, to cook, to clean, to wash their clothes, and the water was not coming. It was very difficult to carry potable water. So you have now a new business of potable water, where people are going up the mountain to bring water. That's caused people didn't have much water, and that caused risk for obviously of many infectious diseases. And on top of that, as we said before, all that water was going to go back down to the city coming from the mountain, not that dirty water. We had even more people. We had even more people still that was trying to come to Port-au-Prince because one of the things that came, it isn't. The issue is that Port-au-Prince is the place where you find most the greatest possibilities. You have a lot of people who are coming even more. I can't hear. It's getting worse. There's security, and there's not much security in the countryside. People thought that they had to move to Port-au-Prince. Curiously, the earthquake will cause that. There's another problem because if those houses are destroyed like that in Port-au-Prince, the government, perhaps with its own means, through the help of the international community, we're going to build even more houses. In other words, the housing issue will even worsen. Will worsen in Port-au-Prince. In the housing program, the other housing issue we have is people are going to the mountain and causing environmental problem there too. What kind of security people have on their land? All these problems. They are on top of each other. And after the earthquake, the situation is worsening. Now the other gentlemen are going to be talking about about the tents. The issue is so bad that every day we see that the solutions are becoming more complicated, more complex, more difficult to find. The issue is at the state level, at the government level, also at the university level. The schools were destroyed also, where people can see. Even in at the universities, there's a series of problems that we are going to have to resolve. What we could say, we'll have the opportunity to talk about certain of those issues, but what we can see is that Port-au-Prince is a city that's becoming more and more difficult, especially since we have all those destroyed houses, and they have yet to finish cleaning up the spaces from all those concrete from the earthquake. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and that costs a lot of money, and that causes even more and more insecurity in the city, like Port-au-Prince. So this is why, at the university level. Huh? That's good. That's good. Now it's good. The issue of people, displaced people, how you could go and help those people. What do we need to do so we can resolve and also help them in resolving those issues? But it's a problem that is really difficult to resolve. And when there are cases like threats, like today we're talking about Ebola, here we have even more threats because there's such promiscuity in Port-au-Prince and its in surroundings that what you have also, like you have diseases like cholera, people have even greater fear in Port-au-Prince. In other words, there are certain interventions at the governmental level that should be performed. There are also things that government should do, but mostly there is a necessity for them to work with certain groups in the country to figure out how to have better urban planification, use of space for business, for commerce, for housing. So that pushes us to a different question, which is not it's not a question just for engineers and architects. It's also for sociologists. It's a serious problem for us. We're beginning to see what we can say, what we can do, what we can say to the population, to the people, what we have to also discuss with the government regarding the current situation. We are at this stage right now, and we're trying to come up with a series of ideas so we can improve. We just wrote something about it in our paper. We'll talk about housing. Perhaps we had 2 issues in our paper where we discuss housing, and perhaps we're going to have to write about housing again. Well, I know that my time is almost up. I'm going to stop and I'm going to let the other gentleman have the opportunity to speak.